They told me the mountain air would be too thin for my lungs. That's what my son said, standing in my kitchen 3 days before Thanksgiving, his hands shoved deep into his pockets like a teenager caught in a lie. Mom, we love you, but the lodge is at 8,000 feet. With your breathing issues, it's just not safe. I don't have breathing issues. I had bronchitis once, 4 years ago, and suddenly I became a woman made of glass. My daughter-in-law, Karen, nodded along, her face arranged in that careful sympathy she reserves for difficult conversations. We'll do Christmas together instead, she promised, squeezing my hand. Something closer to sea level. Something more. Appropriate. There's that word again. The one that started appearing in conversations around my 65th birthday like an uninvited guest. My granddaughter, Emma, just 9 years old, hugged me tight before they left. I wish you could come, Grandma Dot, she whispered into my sweater. I'll bring you back a pine cone. I watched their minivan disappear down Maple Street, the November wind cutting through my cardigan. The house behind me felt suddenly cavernous, all those empty rooms waiting to be filled with sounds that wouldn't come. I had planned to spend this Thanksgiving surrounded by family, passing gravy boats and listening to my granddaughter's endless chatter. Instead, I would spend it alone, deemed too fragile for a family trip to the mountains. The first day wasn't terrible. I cleaned obsessively, the kind of cleaning that makes your joints ache and your mind quiet. I reorganized the pantry, scrubbed the baseboards with a toothbrush, alphabetized my spice rack. Busy hands don't tremble. Busy minds don't wander. By Wednesday evening, I had a spotless house and a hollow chest. I heated up a can of soup for dinner and ate it standing at the kitchen window, watching the neighbors' children rake leaves into piles and jump. Their laughter carried across the yard like music from another world. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the house settle and creak, all its familiar sounds suddenly unfamiliar without the promise of company. I reached for my phone around midnight, thinking maybe I'd text my son just to say goodnight. That's when I saw the notification. Emma had tagged me in a video on TikTok. She wasn't supposed to have TikTok. Karen had been very clear about that at dinner last month, going on about screen time limits and age-appropriate content. But there it was, a video from an account called EmmaBean2015. And when I clicked on it, my entire world shifted sideways. Palm trees, crystal blue water, my granddaughter spinning on a ship's deck in a sundress, her hair flying. Thanksgiving cruise life, she squealed at the camera. Best vacation ever. Behind her, I could see my son lounging on a deck chair, sunglasses on, a tropical drink in his hand. Karen walked past in a bikini top, waving. The ship's name was visible on a towel draped over the railing. Royal Caribbean. My fingers went cold. I sat up in bed and began to search. It didn't take long. Karen's Instagram, which I rarely checked because she only ever posted inspirational quotes about motherhood, was suddenly full of photos. Sunset over the ocean. A formal dinner in the ship's dining room. A couple's massage at the spa. And there, in the caption of a photo showing their balcony suite, the words that made my stomach drop. Finally splurging on ourselves. We deserve this. I knew, before I even logged into my bank account, what I would find. But I did it anyway. I sat in the dark of my bedroom at 1 a.m. and watched the numbers tell their story. The cruise booking, charged 3 weeks ago. The flights to Miami, the port excursion packages, the drink packages, the specialty dining, all of it on the credit card I had given my son 2 years ago for emergencies. Just in case something happens while you're traveling, I had told him when I handed it over. Or if there's a medical bill, or the car breaks down, you know. Emergencies. A Caribbean cruise for Thanksgiving was not an emergency. It was a choice, a deliberate, calculated choice to take my money, lie to my face, and leave me behind like yesterday's newspaper. I didn't cry. I think I was too shocked to cry. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I got out of bed, put on my robe, and walked to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat at the table where my husband used to sit every morning reading the paper, and I stared at the wall until the sun came up. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold. I made myself toast and eggs because it felt wrong to skip breakfast on a holiday. I thought about calling my sister in Florida, but she had her own family chaos to manage. I thought about calling my friend Martha from church, but I didn't want to explain. Instead, I picked up my phone and called the number on the back of my credit card. The customer service representative was named Deborah. She had a kind voice and the patience of a saint as she walked me through every charge, confirming dates and amounts. "Would you like to dispute these as fraudulent?" she asked. "No," I said. "They're not fraudulent. They're just unauthorized." "I understand. Would you like to cancel the card and issue a replacement?" "Yes. Cancel it immediately." "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I almost laughed. Could she help me understand how a son I raised, a son I sacrificed for and loved unconditionally, could do this? Could she explain when he stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as a bank account with a heartbeat? "No," I said. "That's all." "Thank you, Deborah." The house was silent after I hung up. Outside, I could hear a dog barking somewhere down the street, a car starting, the ordinary sounds of a Thursday morning in Willowbrook, Vermont. But inside these walls, something had shifted. The air felt different, charged with a kind of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out the fireproof lockbox where I kept important documents. My husband Roger had been meticulous about paperwork. "You never know when you'll need something," he used to say. I sorted through birth certificates and insurance policies until I found what I was looking for: power of attorney, dated 3 years ago. I had signed it 6 months after Roger's funeral, when grief made everything feel impossible, and my son had seemed so capable, so trustworthy. "Let me help you manage things, Mom," he had said. "You shouldn't have to worry about finances on top of everything else." I had been grateful then. I had signed without hesitation, believing I was lucky to have such a devoted son. Now I stared at his signature next to mine and felt something cold settle in my chest. The bank opened at 9. I was waiting at the door when the manager, a young man named Kevin who had known my husband, unlocked it. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, surprised. "Happy Thanksgiving. Is everything all right?" "No," I said, "but I'm fixing it." In his office, I explained what I needed. Revocation of power of attorney, new security protocols on all accounts, restricted access, sole authority, the works. Kevin didn't ask unnecessary questions. Maybe it was my tone, or maybe he'd seen this before. Maybe there were more old women like me than I wanted to believe, women who trusted too much and discovered too late. "This will take effect immediately," he said, handing me copies of everything. "Brian will no longer be able to access or make decisions regarding any of your accounts." "Good," I said. "What about the charges already made?" "Those are a separate matter. You could pursue legal action if you wanted." I shook my head. "I don't want his money back. I want his hands off mine." Kevin nodded slowly. "Understood." I drove home through streets decorated with inflatable turkeys and harvest wreaths. Families were gathering in driveways, carrying casserole dishes and pie boxes. Normal people having normal holidays. I pulled into my garage and sat in the car for a long moment, engine off, hands still on the wheel. The phone in my purse had been buzzing all morning. I hadn't looked. When I finally did, there were 6 missed calls from Brian and 4 from Karen. No voicemails at first. Then one, "Hey Mom, just checking in. Hope you're having a good Thanksgiving. Give us a call when you can." His voice sounded casual, unconcerned. He had no idea the card had been canceled. He probably wouldn't know until they tried to pay for something at dinner tonight, maybe dessert or a round of drinks at the ship's bar. I deleted the voicemail without responding. In the kitchen, I made myself a proper Thanksgiving dinner. Nothing fancy, just a small chicken breast, mashed potatoes from scratch, green beans from a can. I set the table with the good china, the plates Roger's mother had given us for our wedding. I even lit a candle. Then I sat down alone and ate every bite, not because I was hungry, but because I refused to let them take this from me too. The holiday, the ritual, the simple dignity of a meal eaten at my own table, in my own home, that still belonged to me. The first call came at 7:30 that evening. I let it ring, then another, then a text from Karen. "Hi, Mom. Having trouble with the card. Is there a different one we should use?" I stared at that message for a long time. The casualness of it. The assumption that I would simply provide another avenue for them to drain my accounts. I turned off my phone and watched the evening news until I fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, Friday, I woke to 17 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic messages. "Mom, something's wrong with the card. Mom, please call us back. Mom, this is serious. We're stranded at the port and can't pay the final bill." That last one made me smile, just a little. Stranded. What a dramatic word for people who had chosen to abandon me. I made coffee, read the paper, and at 9 o'clock I called my lawyer. His name was David Chen, and he had handled Roger's estate 3 years ago. "Dorothy," he said warmly, "what can I do for you?" "I need to update my will," I said, "and I need to do it quickly." The weekend passed in a blur of paperwork and decisions. I met with David on Saturday, going through every detail of my estate. The house, the savings, the investments Roger had carefully built over 40 years. All of it had been intended for Brian, the only child we could have, the son we had poured everything into. "You want to remove him entirely?" David asked, not judging, just clarifying. "Not entirely. I want to establish a trust for Emma that she can access when she turns 25, not before and not through her parents. And the rest? To charity. The church food bank, the animal shelter, the community center where Roger used to volunteer." David made notes. "This is a significant change, Dorothy. Are you certain?" I thought about the cruise photos. I thought about the lies. I thought about standing alone in my kitchen on Thanksgiving while my son sipped cocktails in the Caribbean sun. I've never been more certain of anything. They came back on Sunday evening. I heard the car in the driveway, the doors slamming, the footsteps on the porch. The doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession. When I opened it, Brian stood there in a Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops, completely inappropriate for Vermont in late November. His face was tight with anger. Karen lurked behind him, arms crossed, Emma half hidden behind her mother's legs. "What the hell, Mom?" Brian started. "Do you have any idea what kind of weekend we've had?" I said nothing, just looked at him. "We were stuck at the port for 6 hours. 6 hours! They threatened to call the authorities. We had to borrow money from Karen's sister just to get off the ship. And then our flight home. We couldn't even buy food at the airport because the card was canceled." I finished. "Yes," he said, "because you canceled the card. Without warning. Without explanation. What were you thinking?" I stepped back from the doorway. Not to let them in, just to give myself space. "I was thinking," I said slowly, "that my credit card was for emergencies, not vacations." His face flickered. Just for a moment, something passed through his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "It was a last-minute thing," he said. "Karen's friend had this deal, and we couldn't pass it up. We were going to tell you." "When?" "When you got back. After you'd already spent $3,000 on a cruise, you told me was a trip to a mountain lodge." "Mom, you told me the air would be too thin for my lungs, Brian. You looked me in the eye and lied about where you were going. And then you paid for it with my money." Karen stepped forward, her voice smooth and practiced. "Dorothy, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We never intended to deceive you. We just knew you'd worry, and we didn't want to cause stress. You didn't want to invite me," I corrected. "That's different from not wanting to cause stress." "Well, honestly?" Karen's mask slipped, just a fraction. "A cruise isn't really suitable for someone your age. The activities, the dining times, the crowds. You would have been miserable." There it was, the truth, finally. Not the mountain air, not my lungs, not my health, just inconvenience. I had become an inconvenience to my own family. I looked at Emma, who was watching with wide, confused eyes. This wasn't a conversation for her. "Emma, sweetheart," I said gently, "there's a jar of cookies in the kitchen. Why don't you go have some?" She looked at her parents. Brian nodded shortly, and she scurried past me into the house. Only when I heard the cookie jar lid did I continue. "I've made some changes this weekend," I said. "What kind of changes?" Brian's voice was wary now. "I've revoked your power of attorney. I've restricted access to all my accounts. And I've updated my will." Silence. Karen's face went pale. "You what?" "You heard me. Mom, that's extreme. One misunderstanding and you're rewriting your will?" "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. You chose to lie. You chose to steal. You chose to leave me alone on a holiday so you could vacation in luxury on my dime. Those were choices, Brian. And now I'm making mine." He tried to argue. They both did, talking over each other, their voices rising. I stood in my doorway and let the words wash over me like water. Nothing they said changed anything. Nothing could. When they finally ran out of steam, I spoke quietly. "I think you should leave now, Mom, please. Let's talk about this." "I don't want to talk. I want you to go." Karen grabbed Brian's arm. "Fine. Let her stew. She'll come around." But Brian was looking at me with something new in his eyes. Not anger anymore. Something closer to fear. He was realizing, maybe for the first time, that I wasn't bluffing. "What about Emma?" he asked. "Can she at least visit?" My heart cracked, just a little. Emma was the innocent in all of this. She had done nothing wrong. "Emma is always welcome here," I said. "When you're ready to let her come without strings attached, you know where I live." They left. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a long moment. Then I went to the kitchen where my granddaughter sat at the table, cookie crumbs on her chin, tears in her eyes. "Grandma? Are you and Daddy fighting?" I sat down across from her and took her small hand in mine. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean I love you any less. Mommy says you're being difficult." I smiled sadly. Maybe I am. Maybe difficult is what happens when someone decides they've had enough. She didn't understand. How could she? But she hugged me before she left, holding on tight like she was afraid I might disappear. "I'll come back, Grandma," she whispered. "I promise." The weeks that followed were quiet. Not peaceful, exactly, but quiet. Brian called a few times, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry to pleading. I didn't respond. Karen sent one long email explaining all the reasons I was overreacting, all the ways I had misunderstood their intentions. I deleted it without finishing. Christmas came and went. I spent it with Martha and her husband, eating ham and playing cards until midnight. It wasn't the same as family, but it was something. It was enough. In January, I started volunteering at the community center, helping with the senior lunch program. I met other women my age, women who had their own stories of children who disappointed them, of trust that had been broken. We didn't talk about it much, but there was a recognition between us, a silent understanding. One afternoon, a woman named Gloria sat down next to me during a break. "My daughter emptied my savings account last year," she said, matter-of-factly. Said she needed it for her business. Business failed 6 months later. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. I'm not dead yet. There's time to rebuild." She looked at me with clear, steady eyes. "The question is whether you're going to spend that time waiting for them to change or spend it living your own life." I thought about that conversation for days afterward. In February, a package arrived. No return address, but I recognized Emma's handwriting on the label. Inside was a small jewelry box, and inside that, a bracelet made of colored beads spelling out Grandma DOT. A note was tucked underneath. "I made this at school. I miss you every day. Please don't forget me. Love, Emma. I sat at the kitchen table and cried for the first time since this all began. Not for myself, but for her. For the relationship I wanted us to have. For the grandmother I wanted to be. For all the things that had been poisoned by choices I didn't make. But I put the bracelet on, and I didn't take it off. Spring came slowly to Vermont, the snow melting in patches to reveal the stubborn brown grass beneath. I planted tulip bulbs along the front walkway, something I hadn't done since Roger died. The physical work felt good, the dirt under my fingernails, the ache in my back. I was still here, still capable, still alive. One Sunday afternoon in March, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Brian stood there alone. He looked different than he had in November. Thinner, tired, something hollow around his eyes. He was holding a folder. "Can I come in?" he asked. No demands this time, just a question. I stepped aside. He sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Emma had eaten cookies 4 months ago. For a long moment, he didn't speak, just sat there, turning the folder over in his hands. "Karen and I are separated," he finally said. I hadn't known. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. "I'm sorry," I said, because it seemed like the right thing to say. "Don't be. It's been coming for a while." He opened the folder and slid it across the table. Inside were pages and pages of handwritten notes, receipts, numbers. "I started keeping track," he said quietly. "After Dad died, I started writing down everything you gave us, every check, every loan, every time you covered something because we were short. I told myself I'd pay it back. I told myself it was temporary." I looked at the pages. Years of my generosity, documented in my son's handwriting. Why? I don't know. Guilt, maybe, or denial. If I wrote it down, I could pretend it was a real debt, something I'd settle someday instead of just taking. And the cruise? His jaw tightened. That was Karen's idea, but I went along with it. I could have said no. I could have told you the truth. I didn't. He looked up at me, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I saw my son. Not the man who had lied to me, not the stranger who had stood on my porch demanding explanations. "My son. I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I'm not asking for money or access or anything. I just came to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the cruise. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry for every time I made you feel like you were less important than my convenience." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a robin was singing. "Thank you," I said finally, "for saying that." He nodded, stood up, moved toward the door. Then he paused. "Emma asks about you every day. She wears that bracelet you sent her for her birthday. She says it reminds her that you're still there, even when she can't see you." My eyes burned. "Tell her I'm always here, whenever she's ready." He left. I sat at the table for a long time, looking at the folder full of numbers. All those years of giving, documented and totaled. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about being seen, being valued, being treated like a person instead of a resource to be managed. I closed the folder and put it in a drawer. Not to forget, but to remember. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to Brian, not to Karen, to Emma. I told her about her grandfather, about how we met at a church picnic in 1975, about the life we built together in this house. I told her about the values I hoped she would carry forward, about kindness and integrity and the importance of keeping your word. I told her that love isn't always easy, that sometimes it requires boundaries, that walking away from someone doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've started caring about yourself too. I sealed the letter and put it in my lockbox, next to the updated will. Someday, when she was older, she would read it. She would understand. Summer arrived with long golden evenings and the smell of fresh-cut grass. I joined a book club at the library. I started taking watercolor classes on Saturday mornings. I learned to be alone without being lonely, to fill my days with things that mattered to me, not just things that mattered to other people. Emma came to visit in July, dropped off by Brian for a week. We made cookies and watched old movies and walked to the park to feed the ducks. She didn't ask about the fight. Maybe she didn't remember, or maybe she had decided it didn't matter. On her last night, we sat on the porch swing watching fireflies. "Grandma?" she said. "Yes, sweetheart? I'm glad you didn't forget me." I pulled her close, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her small heart beat against my side. "I could never forget you, Emma. Not ever." She snuggled deeper into my arms. "Mommy says you're stubborn, but I think you're brave." Out of the mouths of babes. "Maybe I'm both," I said. She nodded seriously. "That's okay. I want to be both too when I grow up." The fireflies blinked on and off, tiny lights in the gathering darkness. I thought about all the years behind me and whatever years lay ahead. I thought about the mother I had been and the woman I was becoming. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. I closed my eyes and listened. They didn't sound like loss anymore. They sounded like beginning. If you're watching this, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told you're too old, too fragile, too inconvenient for the people who should love you most, I want you to know something. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are exactly enough, and anyone who can't see that is missing out on something precious. Don't wait for them to realize it. Don't put your life on hold hoping they'll change. Start living now. Start choosing yourself now. It's not selfish, it's survival, and it's never, ever too late.